At 10:20 on a Tuesday morning, my ex-husband's porch light was still burning, and our oldest son had already marked his visit complete. The problem was that Evan's shift ended at 10, 40 minutes across town. So who had checked the box? And was Cal alone inside? I turned my car around before I had a polite answer for either question. I had spent 31 years dispatching city buses. A status light meant something only if the bus was where the screen said it was. When time and location disagreed, you did not admire the screen. You called the driver. I called Cal. The phone rang until his old answering machine picked up. I called again as I drove the 6 blocks back to his bungalow. The porch light shone pale in the morning sun. His newspaper was still folded beside the front step. Cal had given me an emergency key after his hip procedure when our sons made a schedule for his first 2 weeks at home. I had agreed to 2 visits, both written in my own handwriting: Wednesday dinner and Sunday laundry. I had not agreed to Tuesday morning. I knocked hard, called his name, and used the key. He was on the kitchen floor beside a chair, conscious and furious with himself. I called emergency services and followed the dispatcher's instructions. I did not try to lift him. I stayed where he could see me and told him help was coming. "Don't tell them the boys weren't here," he said. That request frightened me almost as much as finding him on the floor. Cal and I had been divorced for 9 years. We were not enemies. We were not one of those former couples who pretended the marriage had never happened. We had raised 2 sons, buried 3 dogs, paid off most of a bungalow, and learned too late that affection could survive where a marriage could not. The paramedics arrived. Cal answered their questions. He could move his feet and talk clearly, but every attempt to shift made his face tighten. They prepared to take him to the hospital for an evaluation. Evan's green checkmark still sat in the family calendar on my phone. At the hospital, a nurse asked who had found Cal. Before I could answer, Cal said, "My son came by." I looked at him. He looked at the blanket over his knees. "I found him," I said. There was supposed to be a family visit this morning, but no one was there. I did not say it to shame him. I said it because the next plan would be built from whatever we told them, and I had spent too much of my life watching bad information become a bad route. Evan arrived 20 minutes later in a navy work shirt with his name stitched over the pocket. He was 42, broad-shouldered like his father, and still had the habit of entering a room as if everybody had been waiting for him. "Thank God you covered Luke's slot," he said to me. Cal closed his eyes. "I didn't cover anyone's slot," I said. Evan looked at his phone. "Luke said you were backup." My younger son's name appeared on the screen before Evan finished speaking. Luke lived 15 minutes from Cal and worked from home 3 days a week. He answered on speaker. "Is Dad okay?" "He's being checked," Evan said. "Why didn't you go?" "It was your morning. You swapped with me Sunday." "I asked if you could swap. You sent a thumbs up." Evan rubbed his forehead. "That meant I saw it." Luke went quiet, then said, "Mom always checks on him." I had not heard my name used that way in years, not as a person, as a bridge somebody expected to be under his feet. Cal said, "It was a mix-up. Let it go." The doctor later told us Cal had not caused any obvious new damage, but he needed observation and another look at whether the house was workable while he recovered. The medical details belonged to Cal and his clinicians. The family problem belonged to all 4 of us. Evan leaned against the wall and said he could rearrange things. Luke said the same from his phone. Neither one gave a day or a time. The calendar on my phone looked impressive if you did not know what had happened. Blue and orange boxes alternated across 2 weeks. Grocery delivery had a little cart icon. Follow-up appointments had bells. The Tuesday square was green now, which meant completed. I opened the details. Evan had checked it at 9:42. His shop was 23 miles from Cal's house. Even if his shift had ended exactly at 10 and every light had favored him, he could not have stood in that kitchen by 9:42. The checkmark did not prove which brother had failed more. It proved something simpler. The tool they had built to keep Cal safe had been used to end an argument. Evan saw the screen in my hand. I said I messed up. You said there was a mix-up. What difference does the word make right now? A mix-up sounds as if the calendar confused you. You used the calendar to tell Luke the job was done. He sat in the vinyl chair beneath the window. His anger left him as quickly as it had come, and what remained was worry. I had a supervisor in front of me, he said. Luke sent 6 messages. Dad had sounded fine the night before. I thought I would deal with it at lunch. That was believable. I did not need him to be a monster for the choice to be wrong.
Then say that to your father. He's already embarrassed. He is the one who was on the floor.
Evan looked toward Cal's room.
You know how he gets when he thinks we're fighting.
I did know. Cal would make himself responsible for everyone's tone. Then he would hand me the work of fixing whatever lay beneath it. Your father's discomfort is not permission to give him a false plan, I said. Evan asked if I could wait before telling Luke about the early checkmark. I heard the old assignment inside the question: hold the difficult fact until the family could absorb it, which usually meant until the fact had lost its shape. You can tell him yourself, I said. I knew that language. Cal had used it when the boys were young. Evan would forget a school form, Luke would leave his bicycle in the rain, and Cal would tell me, "We'll handle it." What he meant was that I would handle the immediate problem, and he would make sure nobody felt bad for causing it. For a long time, I mistook that arrangement for being needed. Cal was a warm father. He never missed a ball game if he could help it. He could turn pancakes into letters and fix a loose cabinet hinge before breakfast. But he hated disappointing the boys, even when disappointment was the honest consequence of what they had done. As they became adults, the problems grew up with them. A forgotten utility payment became a loan we did not discuss. A weekend move became 3 days of packing that somehow belonged to me. A promise to visit Cal's sister became a birthday card I selected, signed, and mailed for everybody. Cal thanked me each time. Then he told the boys what a good job we had done. Our divorce did not come from one betrayal. It came from years of being praised for carrying what no one had asked permission to place in my hands. Afterward, Cal and I found a better distance. We spoke on birthdays. We shared coffee when one of the boys made a major announcement. If he needed a ride after a procedure, he asked me directly, and I could say yes or no. The hip procedure had tested that piece. At the family meeting before he came home, Evan created a shared calendar. Luke offered grocery delivery. Cal insisted he would need almost nothing. I asked one question: who is actually there each day? Evan colored the boxes blue and Luke colored them orange. They laughed about running a tighter operation than the transit department. I wrote my 2 visits in black ink on the printed page. I am not the blank spaces, I said. They all heard me. I know because Evan repeated it with a smile. Mom is not the blank spaces. On Tuesday morning, they had turned me into the blank spaces anyway. By afternoon, Cal had a hospital room. A staff member said someone would speak with him about what help he would need before leaving. Evan said he could take a few days off. Luke said his company was flexible. I pulled a paper napkin from the dispenser, turned it over, and drew 7 boxes. Monday, I said. Who can be there? Evan frowned. We don't need to do this now. The plan failed this morning. Now is when we do it. Cal shifted against his pillow. Nora. I kept my voice level. I'm not deciding anything. I'm asking what exists. Evan could do evenings except Thursday, when his daughter's family came for dinner. Luke could do Tuesday and Friday mornings unless a client scheduled a call. Evan thought Luke had agreed to weekdays. Luke thought Evan had taken every morning because he started work early. Who checked the box today? I asked. Evan stared at the napkin. I did, he said. Luke kept texting during a meeting. I marked it so he'd stop. I was going to call Dad after work. You marked a visit complete before anyone came? It was 1 box. Luke's voice came sharply from the phone. "You told me it was handled. You could have called him yourself." "I did." It went to voicemail. I assumed Mom was there. Cal looked at me. "Could you take mornings this week, just until we settle down?" There it was. Not cruelty. Something harder to fight because it wore the face of trust. I folded the napkin once. "I will come Wednesday for dinner if you are home, and Sunday to help with laundry," I said. "I will visit because I care about you. I will not manage the calendar. I will not promise the hospital that someone is there when no one has agreed to be." Evan's jaw tightened. "So you're making a point now?" "No. I made the point before he came home. This is me keeping it." Cal asked the boys to leave us alone. When the door closed, he looked smaller than he had that morning. "I told them you'd never let anything happen to me," he said. "You told them that without asking me. I knew you'd come. Because I saw the light. What if I had taken another street?" He had no answer. For years, Cal had left the porch light on when I worked late. My routes crossed the city after midnight, and I would turn onto our block to see that square of yellow waiting. Back then it meant somebody knew I was still out in the dark. On Tuesday it meant no one had arrived to turn it off. "Why did you ask me to lie?" I said. "They're busy." That is an answer to why they missed the visit. It is not an answer to why you wanted the hospital to believe they came. Cal picked at the edge of his blanket. "Evan needs to be the reliable one. Luke thinks Evan judges him. If this becomes a fight, they'll stop talking again." So I was supposed to make the fight disappear. I wasn't thinking. "You were. You were thinking about protecting them." He nodded. "And you were using me to do it." That took longer, but he nodded again. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired in a place I thought had healed. "I will help you," I said, "but I won't help the family pretend." The next day, Cal agreed to spend a short period in a rehabilitation unit while he regained confidence moving around. Nobody promised a date or an outcome. Staff asked him practical questions about dressing, meals, stairs, transportation, and who could reliably help. He answered most of them himself. The bungalow complicated everything. Its bedroom was on the first floor, but the only full bathroom was upstairs. The front steps had a rail on one side. The kitchen was narrow enough that Cal's walker caught the table if he turned too fast. He had managed for several days because he had treated every difficult trip as proof he was improving. He had not told anyone when he skipped a shower or ate crackers instead of making lunch. "I can go home," he told me. "Maybe," I said. "That doesn't sound like you believe me. It sounds like I'm not the person who decides." He gave me a hard look. "You always have an opinion." "I do. An opinion is not a promise to make the opinion work." At the rehabilitation unit, Evan offered his basement. He described it as a suite. I had seen it at Thanksgiving. It was a carpeted room beside a furnace closet, down 13 stairs, with a half bath and a fold-out couch. "We can add a shower later," he said. "How does Dad get there now?" I asked. "We'll help him." "Who is we?" Evan looked at me, then at Cal. Luke's offer sounded better at first. His spare bedroom and bathroom were on one level. He had wide halls and a small patio. Then he began listing conditions. Cal would give up his car immediately. Luke would hold the house keys so he could manage things. Appointments would go through Luke's phone because shared calendars were confusing. Cal's mail would be forwarded. Luke wanted access to his bank account in case bills came due. "I can pay my own bills," Cal said. "For now," Luke answered. The room changed after that. Until then, Cal had been trying to sound grateful. He had thanked Evan for the basement and Luke for the spare room. He had called both offers generous. Now he asked, "Has either one of you asked me where I want to live?" Evan said, "Dad, this is about safety." Luke said, "We're trying to solve the problem." "I seem to be the problem in both solutions," Cal said. No one spoke. I took a breath and asked the questions I used to ask when a route was disrupted. Where was the bathroom? Who was present at 6 in the morning? What happened if a work call ran long? How would Cal get to an appointment? Which promise depended on another person giving up something he had not agreed to give? I did not answer the questions for them. Evan's basement had stairs and evening coverage. Luke's house had a workable layout and rules that treated Cal like a package being accepted. Cal looked at me. What else is there? That evening, Cal and I sat near the unit's front windows while rain tapped the glass.
He had finished his dinner and saved the sealed crackers in the drawer, a habit left over from childhood stories about lean weeks. For the first time, he spoke about the bungalow as something other than a destination. "Your roses will die if no one cuts them back," he said. "They became your roses in the divorce." They never listened to me. They did not listen to me either. He smiled, then stared at his hands. "Evan's basement is not really possible, is it? You heard the same questions I did. Luke has the room." "He does. He makes me feel old." I let that sit. Cal was old enough to dislike some facts about his body, and young enough to choose what happened next. Luke had taken the real need for help and stretched it into a claim over everything else. "I made you feel like this," Cal said. "When?" "When I told people you liked organizing us. You were good at it, so I decided that meant you liked it." It was a small sentence beside the larger crisis, but it reached further back than his apology in the hospital. "Sometimes I did like it," I said. "I liked getting everybody where they needed to go. I did not like being the only one blamed when somebody refused to leave on time. I thought keeping peace was my part. Peace for whom?" He looked toward the dark window. "Usually the person who had caused the trouble." The rain strengthened. A staff member pushed an empty wheelchair down the hall. Nothing in the moment solved our son's, the stairs, or Cal's recovery. But he had begun to describe the pattern without asking me to carry the description for him. "If neither house works," he said, "I need to see what does." On the drive to rehabilitation 2 days earlier, we had passed a brick apartment complex called Linden Court. It was not fancy. The balconies were narrow, and the sign out front needed paint. But the buildings were one level, and a city bus stopped near the entrance. I had noticed because I still noticed routes. "There may be nothing available," I said, "but we can ask." Evan shook his head. "An apartment is not care." "Neither is a checked box," Cal said. That was the first time he said it. The next morning, with permission for an ordinary outing, Cal and I rode the bus route past Linden Court. I wanted him to see the distance, the curb, the pharmacy 2 stops away, and the small grocery store across the street. He complained about the bus suspension. He complained about the bench. Complaining was familiar, and I took it as a sign he was beginning to imagine himself there. At the office, a manager gave us a printed sheet. There were no available units. There was a wait list. Cal asked the monthly rent, what utilities were included, and whether he could install a grab bar if management approved the work. The manager said those questions would be handled through the normal process if a unit became available. Cal took out his own pen. "Put my name down," he said. "It could be months," I reminded him. "Then it's months. I want one choice with my name on it." He listed his own phone number as the first contact. Back in his room, he studied his retirement income and ordinary expenses. He could afford the listed range if he sold the bungalow. Selling would take time, and nothing about the apartment was guaranteed. That mattered. I did not want independence to arrive as a prize because Cal had suffered. It had to be a plan that could survive a bad month and a repair bill. We made no triumphant announcement. Cal spent the next 3 days asking questions. He confirmed what he received each month and found the folder containing his property tax and insurance figures. He asked a real estate professional what selling a house might involve and was told, sensibly, that condition, timing, costs, and market interest would all matter. He did not receive an instant offer. At first, every question came to me. How much should I set aside for rides? What do you normally spend? Would you sell the mower with the house? Do you want to? Which sofa fits? Measure the room if one becomes available. He grew irritated. You know what I'm asking. Yes, you are asking me to make the choice feel safe before there is a choice. Is that so terrible? No, it is human. But I cannot guarantee an apartment will open or a house will sell. I can sit beside you while you find out what is true. The next day he called Evan, not me, and asked whether Evan wanted the mower if the house eventually sold. Evan said they were getting ahead of themselves. Cal said perhaps, but the mower still needed an answer. Luke offered to buy the bungalow at a family price and let Cal use the money for care. When Cal asked what family price meant, Luke named a figure before anyone had evaluated the house. No, Cal said. Luke called me 5 minutes later. He doesn't understand how much work that place needs. Then he can get ordinary advice. You're making him suspicious of us. He asked what your number meant. Luke said I had become cold since the divorce. There had been a time when that sentence could keep me awake. Now I heard what it was asking me to do. Warm the room by setting my own boundary on fire. Cal will decide what happens to his house, I said. I ended the call before he could assign me another motive. The sons reacted as if I had hidden their father in another state. Evan called me. You're putting ideas in his head. He has always had ideas in his head. He needs family. Then tell him exactly when you can come. Why are you so determined to punish us? I'm not. Your father asked for another option. 10 minutes after that call, Evan forwarded me 3 apartment listings and the phone number of a home care agency. His message said, "You're better at this stuff." I forwarded it to Cal. Luke offered to pay someone if I would choose the person, schedule the hours, receive the updates, and call him only if there was a problem. No, I said, it's one phone call. Then you can make it. You're retired. Retired does not mean waiting for assignments. Luke sighed. Fine, I guess Dad can figure it out. He said it like a threat. Cal heard it as permission. Staff helped Cal compare the help he might need with what was actually available. The arrangement stayed ordinary and uncertain. A paid helper for limited tasks, rides when he could not use the bus, follow-up visits, and family support only where someone agreed to provide it. We did not pretend one program would solve every hour. Cal improved. He learned what he could do and what still tired him. He stopped saying the bungalow was fine and started saying he missed it. There was more truth in "I miss it." One Thursday afternoon, Linden Court called Cal. A tenant had changed plans and a one-bedroom unit might be available sooner than expected. The manager offered a tour. She did not offer a miracle. Cal still had to apply, decide, and work out the costs. He called me himself. "Will you come?" he asked. "Yes." "Not the boys." "That part is your decision." The apartment was smaller than the room where Cal was staying. The kitchen had space for a 2-person table only if one chair stayed against the wall. The bedroom window faced a parking lot. Someone had painted every wall the same beige. Cal stood inside the front door and looked down the short hall. "No stairs," he said. He walked to the bathroom. He opened the closet. He measured the kitchen with his eyes and said his old dining table would never fit. "You hate that table," I said. "I've hated it for 30 years. That doesn't mean I want somebody else to hate it." We both laughed. And then he cried. Not loudly. He put one hand against the counter and looked toward the window. "I thought I'd leave that house feet first," he said. "You can say no." "I know." That was why the apartment mattered. Not because it was perfect, but because he could reject it.
We checked the laundry room, the mailbox, the curb to the bus stop, and the distance to the community room. Cal asked the manager every question himself. I kept my mouth closed unless he turned to me. On the way back, he said, "I want it." "Tell them." He did. Evan had already told his wife that Cal was moving into their basement. Luke had cleared his spare room and posted a photograph in the family thread with the words, "Ready for Dad." Cal's decision embarrassed them publicly, though he had made it privately. That embarrassment became the next pressure. Evan said the apartment was reckless. Luke said Cal was confused by the paperwork. Neither claim matched the man sitting in front of us, reading the lease twice and asking about the deposit. "Mom is pushing you," Evan said. Cal looked at me, and for 1 second I thought he might ask me to defend myself. Instead, he said, "Your mother drove me to a place I asked to see. I chose it." Luke crossed his arms. "Then don't expect us to rescue you when it goes wrong." Cal's face tightened. That was the moment he could have retreated. All his life, losing the boy's approval had felt more dangerous than losing his own comfort. He signed the lease. He also gave formal notice that he would not return to the bungalow. The house sale would follow through ordinary professionals and an uncertain timeline. There was no hidden fortune waiting behind the decision. He would trade a paid-down house, familiar rooms, and a street where everyone knew him for a one-bedroom apartment with a bus stop and a manager who had met him twice. He did it because the smaller life was his. Before he left rehabilitation, Cal requested one family meeting. The room held a square table, 5 chairs, and a window facing the employee parking lot. A social worker sat with us long enough to make sure Cal's practical plan was understood. Then the family part belonged to Cal. He placed 3 old brass keys on the table. Evan and Luke each had one for the bungalow. Mine was the third. "The apartment comes with 2 keys, Cal said. "I will keep one. The office keeps the other according to its rules. Nobody in this family gets a key just because they are family." Luke stared at him. "You don't trust us." "I trusted a green check mark." Evan looked at me. "Did you write this speech?" Cal answered before I could. "Your mother has spent half her life writing the speech I wanted to give without making me give it. That is part of how we got here." He turned to me. "I am sorry." It was not a performance. He did not ask me to forgive him in front of witnesses. He turned back to the boys. "I let her carry bad news because I wanted you to think I was easy to love. I let you believe she would always cover the part you missed. Then I asked her to lie after she found me." Evan lowered his head. Luke said, "We made one scheduling mistake." "You did," Cal said, "and I helped turn one mistake into a system." He slid Evan's key across the table, then Luke's. "You can visit when we arrange it directly. If you offer a day, keep it. If you cannot, tell me. I will not send your mother to fill it. I will not give either of you my calendar to run." Evan picked up his key and placed it in Cal's palm. "I don't like this," he said. "You don't have to like where I live." "I mean, I don't like that you were alone." Cal waited. "I marked the box," Evan said. "I knew no one had gone." It was the first clean sentence he had given us. Luke pushed his key forward with one finger. "If I have to make an appointment to see my father, then you can call me when you're ready to be reasonable." He stood and left. Cal watched the door close. He did not call Luke back. The visible consequence was not loud. It was 2 keys in Cal's hand and 1 empty chair in a private room. Moving day came 3 weeks later. The bungalow looked bigger as it emptied. Cal stood in the living room while movers carried out the sofa. Every box asked a small question. Which dishes came with him? Which tools went to sale? Did he need 12 bath towels? Where would the framed photograph of the boys' first fishing trip fit? People kept turning to me for answers. "Ask Cal," I said. At first he looked irritated, then he began answering. The blue mugs went. The chipped holiday plates did not. The photograph went in the bedroom, not the living room. The dining table went to a resale shop,
where somebody else could hate it. Evan came and carried boxes. He did not direct the movers. When he asked where the lamp belonged, Cal told him. Evan put it there. Luke did not come. He had asked once more whether he would receive a key. Cal said no. Luke said he was busy. By evening, the apartment was functional. Not beautiful, functional. The bed was made, food was in the refrigerator, a chair sat near the window. Cal had the phone numbers he needed and plans for the help he had chosen. The first week exposed every part of the plan that had looked smooth on paper. The rolling cart Cal ordered was too wide for the laundry room door. He returned it and bought a narrower one. The bus stop bench had no shade after noon, so he moved appointments earlier when he could. A paid helper arrived 20 minutes late on Thursday, and Cal called the office himself instead of calling me to call the office. He telephoned me afterward. "I complained," he said. "Did it help?" "They apologized and gave me a different arrival window." "Good." He waited, perhaps expecting me to ask for the person's name or write down the new time. "That's all?" he said. "Did you need something else?" "No. I suppose I was reporting." "You're allowed to tell me things without giving me a job." He laughed. "I may need practice." So did I. When he mentioned that a pharmacy delivery had gone to the wrong building, I felt 3 possible solutions line up in my mind. I asked whether he wanted help. He said he had already corrected it. The answer left me with nothing to do except listen. That felt strangely intimate. On the 9th day, Cal took the bus 1 stop too far because he was talking to another passenger. He called me from the sidewalk, annoyed but not frightened. "What does the sign say?" I asked. He told me. "The return stop is across the street. I know that. I called to tell you the driver on Route 8 still brakes like he is carrying lumber." Some traditions survive retirement. He got home without rescue. Those inconveniences mattered more than a perfect first week would have. The apartment did not prove Cal would never need anyone. It proved that needing help did not require surrendering every decision to the nearest relative. Everyone seemed to want me to stay the first night. Cal was the only one who did not ask. "She has her own home," he said. I kissed his cheek and left. Evan promised to visit the following Saturday at 11. He did not ask me to remind him. I did not write it down. Saturday came. 11 passed. At 11:15, Evan texted me. "Traffic is terrible. Tell Dad I'm close." I was at my reading group across town. For several minutes, the old reflex sat in my hand with the phone. I could call Cal. I could soften the delay. I could make Evan sound more considerate than he had been. I put the phone face down. At noon, Cal called me. "Is Evan with you?" I asked. "No." I waited. "I called him," Cal said. "He said traffic." "All right. You're not going to explain it? Do you need me to?" There was a pause. "No." Evan arrived at 12:20 with cold coffee and a long apology. Cal listened. "Ask me for another day," he said. "Next Saturday, 11. "All right." The next Saturday, Evan arrived at 10:53. Repair did not happen in that one visit. That would have been another checked box. It happened slowly enough that nobody could mistake it for a speech. Evan came the following week and the week after. When work required him to miss, he called Cal 2 days ahead and asked for Sunday. He began picking up 1 prescription each month, not because Cal could not arrange delivery, but because it gave them a useful errand and a reason to talk in the car. Luke called every few weeks. His voice was warm until he asked for a key. Cal's answer stayed the same. "What if there's an emergency?" The office follows its emergency process. "So strangers can enter, but your son can't." Staff have a defined job. You want authority without a schedule. Luke would end the call soon after that. Cal missed him. A boundary did not remove that grief. It only stopped grief from making the decision. Over 4 months, Cal's apartment became a life instead of a response to a fall. He used the bus when it suited him and arranged rides when it did not.
He joined a balance class in the community room. He paid for limited help with tasks he did not want to risk. He learned which neighbor watered plants and which one borrowed newspapers without returning them. He called people directly. That was the change I noticed most. If he wanted Evan to visit, he called Evan. If he wanted to know why Luke was distant, he called Luke. If he wanted my company, he called me and asked. Sometimes I said yes. Sometimes I said I had plans. On Tuesdays, I returned to the reading group I had nearly given up during his recovery. On Wednesdays, I often brought Cal dinner, because that was one of the two things I had offered, and because I liked eating with him. Sunday laundry ended after he decided the machines down the hall were manageable with a rolling cart. He did not replace that task with another. One Sunday in early October, Cal called and asked if I wanted to walk the paved loop behind Linden Court. 1 lap, I said. I'm leaving before dark. Evan is bringing groceries at 5. Did you remind him? No. We walked slowly. Cal complained about the wind and the apartment manager's choice of shrubs. He told me Luke had called the night before and had managed a whole conversation without mentioning the key. Do you think he'll come around? Cal asked. I don't know. Months earlier, I would have filled that silence with hope on Luke's behalf. I would have predicted an apology, planned a holiday, or offered to call him. This time I said, "What will you do if he doesn't?" Cal watched a bus pull away from the stop. "Keep living here," he said. At 5 minutes to 5, Evan's truck turned into the lot. He parked, lifted 2 grocery bags, and walked toward us. No one had reminded him. No green box had been checked in advance. "I got the coffee you asked for," he told Cal. Then he looked at me. "Do you need anything?" "I'm going home." He nodded. He did not ask me to stay and organize the refrigerator. I hugged Cal and started toward my car. Behind me, I heard him telling Evan where the cans belonged. At the curb, I looked back once. Cal stood inside his own doorway. Evan waited beside him with the bags. When they went in, Cal reached for the switch and turned off the porch light himself. Then he closed the door, and I drove home before dark.